This video was made possible with support from viewers like you. If you find this video useful, consider becoming a patron for as little as $1 a month at patreon.com/fastgadgets. Alright Gadgeteers, welcome back to another Fast Gadgets video. So I am here in the studio, and as you can see, things are coming together nicely. I've got my new Wi-Fi extender, which also lets me have 5 physical computers plugged in, which is really going to help a lot. Here in the future, I'll be working on the Windows 98 vintage Phenom 166, but for right now, I'd like to get my backup Linux system operational. So I've got here an AMD Phenom II X6, which is a 6-core processor, model part number 1055T. So it is a 6-core unit and reasonably fast. It has right now 8 gigabytes of DDR3 memory in it, but I'm going to put back in the other 8 gigabyte DIMM that I have to give me a total of 16 gigabytes. And I need to put in some cables that I borrowed for my regular desktop system, which is my Dell 5675. So I've got a couple of SATA cables here I'm going to put in. So this unit has a 1 terabyte standard hard drive that I got out of the Dell 5675. It has Windows on it. I'm going to boot it up and see if Windows will actually work and it doesn't require another registration. If it does, I probably will shrink the partition size to like 256 gigabytes for Windows and then put Linux on the rest of it. If Windows isn't working right, I really don't care. I'll just blow it away. What I plan on putting on this, for right now anyway, is Linux Mint. And I'm going to use the KDE version because I primarily use KDE Plasma, of course, because I need it for Kdenlive. Although you can run Kdenlive on other desktops, it looks best when you're using it with KDE Plasma. And I brought my 1080p TV in here to use as my main monitor for the unit. And then of course I've got my regular, I believe that's a 17-inch 4:3 monitor that is being used for my beautiful Phenom 166 down here. So let's get started. I'm going to put the computer up on the desk and we're going to have a look inside, get it all connected, get the memory installed, and get things ready to go. Now, I honestly don't remember what the condition was I left this system in, so let's pop off the case here. Despite this case being really old, I still love it. Okay, so I do have the hard drive is installed. It has power, but it does not have data. So we'll go ahead and fix that. Now I'm not sure which connector is which here. I don't know if you can see them, but we have one connector here and I believe there are 4 more there. I do have a DVD writer in here, but of course it uses the standard IDE cable. Well, it's not standard actually, it's an 80-pin IDE cable. All right, we'll get the data plugged in for the hard drive. And we've got the extra DIMM here that I'm going to put in. Now, one thing I am not sure about is if I'm supposed to put these right next to each other or if I should put it in the white slot to get the doubled performance. And I'm thinking I should put it in the white slot. I could be wrong. Some of these motherboards, and I haven't investigated this one close enough, I'll have to look at it, but I do believe we want it in that slot like that. When we get it booted up, we'll know more. I see down here there was a screw in the fan. That wouldn't have been very good. Now I also see up here that I have a fan loose. I used to run 3 of these fans. So I had the fan that's down here that you can see the edge of, and right over here is another fan. I don't know that I really need all 3 of these. I think it's sufficient to have these 2 in. Power supply should be okay. And I'm looking at my heat sink. It looks pretty clean, so I don't think I'll worry about cleaning that at this point. Looks halfway decent, and I know you're gonna just shudder at my cable job here. I'm not gonna lie, it ain't pretty, but I did have everything, at least for the most part, pushed up and out of the way, but I do need to take this fan off. So I'll pop this one off. I really like these fans. I forget what the millimeter size is, but what I like about them is they're larger, and I got some pretty quiet fans, so you really don't hear these when they're running. So it's quite nice when you're using the computer. You get that extra cooling. I had, of course, overclocked my 2.8 gigahertz. I believe it was at 3.06 using the automated motherboard settings, and it worked pretty well for me. So I'm going to go ahead and tuck that up in there and make sure everything is out of the way of any of the fans. We have the onboard. I think it's like an Radeon 4290. Not very exciting. I've got an old eMachines keyboard here. Hopefully we get something. This computer was fully functional last time I used it, so we really do want it to be working, don't we, folks? I think I'm gonna experiment with taking that memory card, the DIMM that I put in, out and see what that does for me. Okay, got the DIMM out. Power the system back up again. And this time I did get lights on the keyboard. I'll press the delete key. Yeah, maybe I have a bad slot. It's hard to say. Speed is set at 3.08 gigahertz. I press the delete key. I'm hoping it'll go into the BIOS. All right, let's see if it boots up. I've moved the DIMM over, and I think it is now in the position that I would want it in for dual channel. And yes, it's booting right up. Okay, so it is booting. I have to find a mouse, because we're going to need a mouse if we're going to experiment here. So I'm going to shut it off one more time, and I'm going to plug the hard drive back in, and I'm going to go find a mouse. I'll be right back. Mouse plugged in, and I have the hard drive plugged in. So we're going to power up. We'll let it boot up to the hard drive, and we're going to find out whether Windows 10 will boot up, which I somehow doubt it, but one can always hope. I'm sure it's going to freak out because it's in a whole different computer. It's actually never been this drive has never been booted up. Reboot and select proper boot device, or insert boot media in selected boot device and press a key. I've got my bootable device here, which has Linux Mint 18 on it. So I'm going to put that in, and we'll see if we can get it to boot from that. So I will say OK. And while it's doing its reboot, it's done already. Well, anyway, when we get started with installation, I'll put the data cable on, and we'll see if Linux Mint 18 will recognize it. So let's just do a Control-Alt-Delete and see if it's smart enough to grab the USB. I don't think it is. I may have to go into the BIOS setup. We'll try one time anyway, see if it'll grab that USB and boot from it. Yep, there we go. So we'll tell it to boot. Start Linux Mint. I'm assuming it took my enter, but it's just kind of sitting there right now. I'll move this in a little closer. Well, it looks like it's booted up. All right, since this computer is working, I think I'm going to figure out a way to get it down on the floor so I can resituate everything a little bit better for our viewing pleasure. So just give me one moment. All right, we're back and booted. So I'm going to go ahead and I think I'll just begin the install. But one thing I do want to do is try to save some space because I really like to have multiple installs on this particular computer. So without further ado, now let me see if that's a little too bright for you guys. I definitely want you to be able to see what's going on. So we'll go to brightness here. Take it down a wee bit. That's looking pretty good there. Okay, so of course, language, English. I say of course, but that doesn't mean everybody, right? And I am definitely going to do the install third-party software for graphics, Wi-Fi hardware, Flash, MP3, and other media. And I'll do a continue. I'm also hoping that because I'm connected to the internet, it'll be able to do updates for me. Now this is the interesting part. I am on USB 2.0 port, so this computer does not have USB 3.0. And of course it's on a standard hard drive. So it'll be interesting to see how fast this installation actually goes. So we've got guided, use entire disk, and set up LVM, guided, use entire disk, and set up encrypted LVM, which is very cool, but I actually want to not use the whole disk. I wish there was an option here that said guided and use part of the disk. I'm going to click, well, no, see, that goes right to install now. So let's try continue. So it shows 1 megabyte of free space. PC Linux OS. I guess I did put something on here before. What if I just do guided? I'm curious what it'll do there. Will it create physical partitions? Otherwise, I will be able to make further changes manually, huh? All right, let's see if that's the case. I went to time zone, so I'm not sure. I guess manually means literally with the command line. All right, let's put in a junk password. All right, well, it's off and installing, and it really didn't give me an option to do any changes. And it's not the end of the world. Well, let's see how long this takes. So it is 12 after 5 right now. All right, not too shabby. I don't know if you can see what it's saying there, but essentially installation is finished. You can continue testing Linux Mint now, but until you restart your computer, any changes you make or documents you say will not be preserved. I'm going to go ahead and do restart now. All right, it asked me to remove the installation media, which we've done. So we're going to press enter, and we officially will be on Linux Mint. Usually the first thing I do is grab an update. I may see if I can manually resize that ext4 partition, shrink that baby down. But let's boot up and see what we have. 6 minutes for an installation to me is not bad at all on an older machine. And we're going to go ahead and log in, or maybe it's already logging in. Yeah, it's going to take me a little bit to get used to a standard hard drive. I may end up going out and getting an SSD for this computer. It's just so difficult to get used to a slower hard drive once you've been on an SSD. So definitely a whole different experience. All right, let's see if I can do something about the screen brightness for you. All right, that's a little better. So I don't think I need to show this dialog at startup. I'll go ahead and close that. Now I've noticed every time I reboot, my TV goes back in advanced settings. No, overscan is off, so I'm not sure what's going on there. Let me exit. I don't know if you can tell down here, but I've got a cutoff here for the menu, and I don't see the, yeah. So we're going to have to figure that out. I don't know if I can adjust the screen or not. I think it would probably be easier to do it. Let's see, what is normal? That's interesting. After I selected normal, or actually I went back and selected wide again, everything is now correct, so might just be a minor problem that I'll have to live with. But I do think the first thing I'll do is go into the terminal. And let's do a sudo apt get install OBS-Studio. As I recall before, this didn't work. Yeah, I don't know what the name is that it's asking for, so I'm going to go ahead and see if I can get Update Manager to come up. Well, no, I don't want that, do I? I'll do updates later, but what I'm angling for here is install new applications. So what I do want is OBS Studio, that way I can record. Why do we not have OBS? There we are. Taking things too literally. If you don't use a capital S, boy, you're in trouble. And this is a flat pack. Again, I don't know much about flat packs and all that. I do know that on my installation on my laptop that I was experimenting with, that it did work just fine. So we'll get OBS Studio up and running, and then we can capture the screen and it'll look a lot better for you. Looks like we're successfully connected to the network, judging by what I'm seeing here. So the Wi-Fi extender does appear to be working really well. And I think I'll add the terminal to add as launcher, panel. Oh, it's already in favorites, so it says. Let's find out. Yep, it's there. We'll just do a quick ping of Google.com. Yes, we are connected to the internet just like that. That's really nice. Great feature. All right, we're going to see if we can find KSysGuard. I like to keep an eye on processor usage and see what's going on. So we'll just switch over to system load. We got 6 cores running here. All right, OBS Studio is installed, so we'll go ahead and launch it. Terms be reviewed. Not going to use the auto config wizard. I think what we'll do is go ahead and add screen capture. Okay. Okay. And I'm going to go ahead and start recording and see how things go. I'm not sure why we're getting anything on the mic because I don't have anything plugged in, so it definitely wouldn't be detecting anything. Anyway, we're going to do a test recording and make sure everything's going to work okay. Make sure the processor doesn't get overwhelmed, which I highly doubt. And we're sitting at about 33%, which is pretty much par for the course. You know, this is a 6-core processor. We do have 16 gigs of RAM hanging around in here, so really shouldn't be too big of a hit for this system. And now that I think about it, I'm going to go into settings here because I want to make some switches here with the video. It is scaling the output, so I do want to change that, which it looks like I can't do while it's recording, so I'll just stop the recording. And then we'll cruise back into settings, go to output, and just have a quick look at everything here. I'm going to up the bit rate a little bit, see if we can't keep it a decent quality. I didn't actually mean to do that, but that's okay. And I always change this to MKV. That is my preferred version. Let's cruise to video, and let's see if we can change this to the default 1920 by 1080. All right, so I am recording with OBS. It looks like we've got about 45-50%. It was doing a step down from 1920 by 1080 to looked like 1280 by 720, I believe. Let's find out. So if I cruise into settings here and go to output, no, maybe it's video. Yeah, it had changed to video. I guess it won't even show it. But anyway, it had scaled the resolution. I prefer not to have any scaling. I know it does cost me processor-wise, so I'm hitting about 48% total processor usage, but I still think it's worth it because I prefer the 1920 by 1080. I'm using my cell phone to record the audio with a lavalier mic, which is usually the best scenario. So I'll just go ahead and minimize that. I'll keep this up so I know what's going down. But the first thing I wanted to check, and I'm assuming this is what most of you do, is checking updates. It says to let me review them. Always update everything. Honestly, I suppose that's fine. So we do have some kind of update. I remember this. I just did this the other day. So I have to do these first 2 updates first, and then it'll give me the list of updates that's due. So I am going to go ahead and do that. You know, here's the thing. I want the newest or newer version of Kdenlive, and before I did not get it, so I think I'm going to go with some unstable. Linux Mint uses Romeo to publish packages which are not tested. Once these packages are tested, they are then moved to the official repositories. Maybe I'll say no on that and look at additional repositories, CD-ROM, PPAs, backports, official repositories. I've heard a lot of people say they've run unstable and it wasn't a problem, so I don't know what to think. It says not to enable it unless it was recommended by the development team. All right, we'll leave it that way for right now. We'll get a quick update. I'll install Kdenlive again and see which version I get. Okay, select all, install updates. Happy little password. I have to say, for how old this system is, it's actually working pretty good. Okay, so here comes the real list of updates. Let's see what we've got. Local mirrors are usually faster than packages.linuxmint.com. I had pretty good success earlier, so if I do select all, they're already all selected. Okay. Well, let's install them. I'm sure this is going to take a little while. 444 megabytes, and it will trigger additional changes, which is expected. Again, with the authentication, isn't once enough? When I authenticate into the update manager, I should be good to go. And again, download seems to be cruising. So this Wi-Fi extender is way better than I had hoped for. I did see a whole bunch of connecting and disconnecting of the wired Ethernet controller. I don't know if that's a power save thing going on. I'll have to look into that and see what's going on. But yeah, my number one goal here is to get this system set up, get Kdenlive on it, and find out if I can get it updated. The version that I'm using on my Fedora is 17.12.3. And, you know, the thing is, you really do need to have the same version because the projects are very special, the way the files are saved in Kdenlive, so you unfortunately do need to have the same version. I've tried to do it with different versions and it did not work. So we'll let this update go through, and once it's done, we'll install Kdenlive and we'll see what happens. I may have to enable the Romeo repository. I really don't know. I get nervous about doing that kind of stuff, although this is just a test system anyway. I mean, yeah, I'm going to use it as a backup, but with a laptop and a desktop, I don't know what the chances are that I'll get over here and be using this system all that much, so I don't think I'm too worried about it. All right, folks, so the system is now all up to date. I haven't done a reboot, so it's probably still the old kernel. But what I'd like to do now is install Kdenlive and see which version I actually get. I wonder if I could, if I can't get the version I need here. So I've got two. I don't know which one I should choose. I think I did this one last time. Is there anywhere where it says what version it will be? So branch is stable. What about this one? Okay, so I could get version 1804. And I would be able to move my projects over. I would just have to make changes and then move them over, make changes with the 17.12 version and then move them over to here as needed. And I very rarely make changes. So I'm going to give this the old college try. Let's see if we can grab this version. Well, it's actually coming from FlatHub, so if I'm not mistaken, I do have two possible choices, FlatHub here. So I'm going to go ahead and install it and see which version it gives me. By the way, I figured out what was wrong with the network here. I kept kicking the cable to the power and unplugging it and plugging it back in. So as far as I know, that's the only reason why it was disconnecting and reconnecting. All right, let's launch it and see which version we are using. Help about. Wrong about. I always do that. Help about Kdenlive 1804.1. So there is a possibility that I have some of my packages, some of my project files. Okay, so I do have a thumb drive, USB drive with my Fast Gadget stuff, and Kdenlive, and let's scroll down. So here's the #1 template I've been using. Let's see if it crashes. Kdenlive. So far so good. Now usually what I do is just say use placeholders, and if it crashes at this point, then that's all she wrote. Okay. Ooh, it stayed open. Happy days, folks. So there we go. I can now edit using Kdenlive version 18.04 on this particular system. And it was able to load my project, which is all I care. I am curious how fast. Let's drop a video in here. And we'll go ahead and add this to video 1. We're going to select 1 minute's worth. How about that? So we will put our endpoint there. So we've got 1 minute selected of this. And we do have to keep in mind that I am capturing. We'll go to render. I usually use MP4. Always click more options. I usually use 19. Okay. I don't want to render the file just yet because I want to check the project settings and change it to HD 1080p 30. Continue. Now if I go back to render, goes back to WebM, no problem, we'll change it. And we will go back to 160. I like to give it all the real threads that are available. And of course we want to configure Kdenlive and look at environment. And we're going to change this to 6 and this to 6 and then OK. And I think what I'll do, I'm going to do the selected zone. I'm going to go ahead and stop the video recording for a minute so that we can get an accurate timing, and then I'll come right back. All right, so as you can see, I ended with 2 minutes 43 seconds to render 1 minute of 1080p footage. And I got to do a little bit more testing, reboot this system and so on, because it has done all its updates. But it is serviceable and it's functional. That's all I care. So if there was a dire emergency, I could come here and I could rely on this system to do what I needed. Keeping in mind I was coming over USB 2 for the video file. So I think it would be a lot faster if it was on an SSD using videos that were captured locally on the SSD. So I'm sure it can go faster than it did. Processor wise, it peaked at the highest was about 91%. So it definitely was making use of the processor. And certainly my Ryzen 1700 is way faster than this could ever hope to be. But this definitely will work for me, at least in the interim. So I'm gonna, well, actually I'm not gonna bother saving this. This is just a untitled test that I did showing that it worked. I'm really tickled. I've got Kdenlive working on another computer, so I don't feel quite as worried. I think the last thing I will try to do is boot back into the thumb drive, and then what I'll do is go ahead and try to shrink my partition, because right now it's mounted so I can't shrink it, but I should be able to do it with the bootable version of Mint using the thumb drive. So let's go for it and see if we can do it. Okay, well, we're back. Let's do a quick check. We'll look at the disk settings. We use the KDE Partition Manager. So we now have a 250 gigabyte partition here. And I think what I'll do is grab a terminal. Make it a little larger so you can see it. And let's do a DFH. So what do we really have in here? Dev SDA1, 225 gigabytes. So everything is in one physical partition. There is no logical volume management going on. So let's real quick, we'll just change directory to / and have a look here. We do have all our typical directories. I kind of like this better, honestly, because usually with Fedora, it does use logical volume management and a logical volume group. So unfortunately, because of that, home is much smaller. Now there's pros and cons. We may have problems if I run out of space with it running and it may crash. But the cool thing is I have all 225 gigabytes of that partition, which is way more, well, all 247 gigabytes with 9.6 U's. So I have way more storage available than I would if I had used the logical volume management. So this is very cool. It also made it very easy to shrink, and I'll probably install another flavor of Linux here, maybe 2. You know, I mean, basically I'm gonna have a couple of different versions, and then I'll probably allocate the remainder here as just an ext4 partition so I can use it for general storage. And I'll have 2 different versions of Linux on here, and this system will be able to do the testing that I wanted to do, but I also can use Kdenlive, which has surpassed my expectations and my hopes. So far, I'm really enjoying what I've got with Linux Mint. I know there's a version 19 coming out, but I'm not too awful worried about that at this point in time. I have all the tools that I normally use here so far. Got a couple other things I need to install. I wonder if GIMP's on here by default. Yeah, see, GIMP is already on here. Handbrake, no, I'd have to install that, but no big deal. Of course, my web browser terminal. What other applications do we have? Got the image editor, which is good. BitTorrent, which I use to download other versions of Linux. Multimedia, Amarok, audio player. Don't really need a disk burner, but I could. I got OBS, I have my video editor, I've got Dragon video player, and VLC's already installed. Cool, because I like that. Office, I have my Libre stuff. What version we have installed here? Version 5. Cool. And let's go back. Whoops. We'll close Libre. Go back to applications. We checked Office, settings, system. The usual stuff. And And applications again, we'll go back and check utilities. More of what I would expect to see here. So all in all, this is really a nice setup, and it's, you know, because it's KDE Plasma, to me it's very, very similar, and all the applications I need are there. I have the command line. I may have to learn a few new commands for apt-get and some package names if I want to do it that way, but we've seen that the GUI works fine for getting new packages. Overall, I'm very happy with this setup. I've got a working system. So yeah, this is really going to work out well for me. I have a backup system I can go to and a testing system I can do different things on. I can put DOSBox on here and move my DOSBox folder over from my other system and play some games. So this is going to work out good for me. I could put Steam on here, probably won't. I don't think I'm really going to need heavy games like I would get from Steam necessarily. But lots of different software that I can install and check out. As always, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, like and subscribe. Consider possibly sharing the video. If you have any comments or anything that you can suggest to help me with Linux Mint, I would always appreciate it. This is my first foray into Linux Mint in probably 5-6 years, even longer, so quite a while. And thank you for watching. I'll see you next time on Fast Gadget.